I want you to now, because you said something at the introduction of this that I kind of clung to, the rewrite of history almost, of from conservatism towards this period of our greatest generation. It's almost like the co-opting of the greatest generation and trying to rewrite or erase that portion of the greatest generation, which was a fundamental fight for these four freedoms, which was they actually took moves toward this social democracy. And now they want to interpret America today and say the greatest generation was something other than this burgeoning social democracy. Talk more about that.
Right.
That whitewashing.
Right.
This is my favorite word that I always
Right.
use. Go ahead.
Well, almost immediately after Roosevelt's death, in spite of Harry Truman's efforts to make the four freedoms and the Second Bill of Rights very much a part of American public life and American government agencies' efforts, almost immediately Republicans set out to quash any kind of memory and action on the four freedoms and those economic Bill of Rights. For example, in 1946, when the Republicans took control of the House and the Senate, they passed the Taft-Hartley Act, which essentially allowed states, which meant especially in the South, to ban the closed shop. In essence, it set up terrible, almost impossible barriers for labor union organizing. Now, why were they so keen to block labor union organizing? Not only did they hate labor unions, these Southern white supremacists, they knew the labor unions were probably going to be the greatest vehicle alongside of the civil rights movement for the desegregation of the South. So, in essence, that's the first thing. Moreover, in order to quash that 85% of Americans' desires to secure national health care, Southern white supremacists did everything in their power to basically block Harry Truman's efforts to secure national health care. And why were the Southern white supremacists so concerned? Because if national health care passed, they were going to have to desegregate Southern hospitals. I mean, even though 85% of Americans, and believe me, more than others, I imagine people in the South wanted national health care because they were the poorest section of the country. It was truly a backward area of the country. So, in essence, right from the beginning, they were doing everything they could to quash the possibility of the four freedoms and economic Bill of Rights becoming enacted. Now, the generation itself, I'll make...
Okay, yeah,
go
go ahead with that point, and I want to ask a follow-up question. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, well, I want to say that, and I do want to come back to these other things, and if we don't get through it all tonight, you and I will talk again, I hope.
Absolutely.
But if we think there's this arc from the 1930s right through to the 1960s. So when we talk about the greatest generation, and for all of the faults and failings of Tom Brokaw and his work, and he wrote the book, The Greatest Generation, one of the things at least he showed is that there was this arc. So if you figure 1935, these young men and women are 15. In 1945, they're 25 and veterans. In 1955, they're 35. In 1965, they're 45. They're in their maturity. They're the folks, by the way, who for all of their faults and failings, for all of the, again, and they were serious, their faults and failings, these were the folks who actually did enact, when pressed by young people, did enact the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They reformed the immigration laws in this country in 1965. They passed the environmental protection laws, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They created the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I could go on and on. These were the folks who fulfilled those ambitions of the 30s and the four freedoms, or not fulfill, but they go a good way towards fulfilling those things in the 1960s when pushed by my generation, which probably had failed to appreciate what our parents were capable of.
So here's a question no problem. Listen, I'm actually in a doctoral program now, so I'm used to professors going on and on. So I actually enjoy it. But what I want to ask you now is that is the foundation of what the four freedoms are. That is the move away for some of the reasons. I know there's a lot more to it, but you've outlined how we moved away from the focus on it. Yeah, you've touched it.
I could go on and on about the suppression of memory. Can I give you one final example of the suppression of memory? I know we don't have a great deal of time, but let me give, Ronald Reagan, who served in the American military during World War II, was himself in the 30s and 40s an avid Roosevelt supporter. avid Roosevelt supporter. His service in the military involved basically sleeping at home and making movies in Southern California in favor of the war effort. Nevertheless, he was in uniform. And he used to relish reciting lines of Roosevelt's speeches. That's how much, that's the kind of fondness he had. Well, in the course of the 1950s, he moved further and further right and became absolutely viciously anti-New Deal. And yet he never gave up a kind of fondness for Roosevelt. Well, when he became president of the United States, of course, in 1980, he was elected, 81 he becomes president. Through his years in the White House, he did what he could to suppress the memory, in spite of all of his talk about the greatest generation, to suppress the memory of the four freedoms. And what he did in his farewell address is astonishing. He talked about the importance of American memory. And he said, Americans should teach their children about American freedom. And then he said, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of enterprise, and completely expunged from any kind of public reference freedom from want and freedom from fear.
Wow, that is rather. That you know, when you put it in context like that, the shift from being a supporter and a person who recited FDR to a person who completely rewrote FDR in his farewell speech,